Wasabi guys, Void here coming back at y'all with another Commander deck tech video. Well, actually this time we're going to be doing something a little bit different. Something called a Deck Doctor series. This was requested by Arcane Mastery. If you don't remember, I did a little binder video where I show you guys what I put in my own personal binder. And now I think I pretty much get the gist of what he was talking about before when he wanted me to do a Deck Doctor series. Wanted me to go and look through someone's deck that may not be the best deck, or it may need some work, or maybe it's just someone looking for suggestions. Because again, I never claimed to be the best Commander player. I never claimed to be the best deck builder. I just think that some people might trust my judgment. They might appreciate my perspective whenever I go into the deck building process. So Arcane Mastery has given me a little task here to look at this Kemba Kha Regent. This is not his own personal deck, but this is one of his friends' decks, which I think is pretty cool. If you can help your friends out make better decks, you can overall improve your playgroup. Now, it's a screenshot here of this little spreadsheet that he put a lot of the cards in. This is the entire deck, and it turns out that it actually had 101 cards, and the guy didn't even notice. But looking through, I mean, it's actually a pretty playable deck. It's not terrible. It's not something that I would say, oh my gosh, you need to completely just start from the ground up. It's not that bad. I mean, the biggest area where I would say this deck is weak is probably when it comes to removal, when it comes to the sorceries and instants, because it's a little bit harder to tell by this spreadsheet, but there are only 2 sorceries and only 1 instant. So the sorceries, Austere Command, Mass Calcify, those are 2 sorceries you want to play in this deck in mono white. There are still a bunch of sorceries that you could put in here that would make the deck a little bit better. I think the updated version, I have about 6 of them. And the only instant is Swords to Plowshares, which, I mean, you're going to put that in every single white deck anyway. It's kind of restrictive when it comes to your answers, being able to do certain things. But really, when you look in total, there are 47 artifacts in this guy's deck, which, to me, even in an artifact-based deck, even in an equipment-based deck, that is still just way too many. I understand you want to consistently run into your equipments, but you want your deck to be able to handle other situations. You want your deck to be able to do other things. So just like looking through, a lot of these equipments maybe could have been taken out. Shield of the Avatar. I would rather just give the equipped creature indestructible at that point. I know it's incredibly cheap, but it doesn't do anything else for this deck that you can't do with cheaper options. Skull Clamp, believe it or not, is actually terrible in this deck. I know some people might think, well, it's Skull Clamp. How are you going to say Skull Clamp's terrible? Well, in a deck where you want to throw all your equipment onto your commander and get some value, all this is basically going to do is just give +1 power to Kemba, because Kemba's probably never going to die. If she is destroyed or sacrificed, you're going to put her in the command zone, which technically prevents your commander from dying. Skull Clamp's effectiveness is therefore hindered. Now, I mean, again, in theory, you could throw this onto a token and then have the token die, and then you get to draw your 2 cards, but in an equipment-based deck, this is pretty much Voltron, by the way. That's kind of counterintuitive. You want to throw this onto your commander, your general, and swing in for damage, and then have that fallback of, oh, well, if my creature dies, and then I get to draw 2 cards, which is a big misconception. A lot of people think that Skull Clamp is just an auto-include in a lot of equipment-based decks, when it really is only amazing when you have 1/1 tokens to take advantage of. Well, the cat tokens are 2/2, so even if you do put it on them, you still kind of have to hope that there's an easy way to get rid of your creatures so that you can then efficiently draw those 2 cards and you don't have to wait too long. But there are some good equipments in here, like Stoneforge Masterwork. I think that card is just meant for this deck. But then there's some other cards like Altar of Dementia, which, I mean, I get it. You're going to be getting some cat tokens on your upkeep, but it doesn't really do anything special for you. This isn't a mill-heavy deck. There isn't really any synergies with the graveyard, exiling anything in order to stop them from making use out of those cards in their graveyard. So while in theory, yeah, it could be a win con, aside from combat, it's not going to be a very solid one. You don't want to have to get rid of your cat tokens in order to just mill someone out. I mean, you could technically do it, but in a 4-player game, it's not optimal, and it's going to be using up way too many of your resources. You want to win through combat. Then we have cards like Sigil of Valor, which I'm not a big fan of it. I mean, there are cards like Stoneforge Masterwork that are actually good because they pretty much just give Kemba that boost right off the bat. You don't have to wait till you attack with it, and it doesn't have to attack alone to get that boost, so Sigil of Valor is a little bit weaker than what you would want for this deck. And then there's a card like Pen and Blade, which does pretty much the same exact thing, but it's way too expensive. It's 3 mana for an equip cost of 4. Again, I'm probably going to have to describe these cards because of the formatting. Yeah, I mean, it's filled with a bunch of these artifacts, and then we have cards like Alhamerit's Archive, which are kind of head scratchers. I'm not going to keep going on and on about this deck. We're going to get to my updated version of this deck here pretty soon, but you just see a lot of these cards, and then you see Grafted Exoskeleton, which, yeah, in theory, in a Voltron deck, dealing Infect is a lot easier, but I mean, the flavor of the deck is getting cat tokens and then swinging in with your whole team. It's not just a Voltron strategy, so some cards like those can distract you from what the deck is really going to want to do. And now on to my version of the deck. And there's actually a card that, talking to Arcane Mastery, he brought up, and I think it's pretty cool because, again, it deals with the whole interaction of your commander not actually dying when it would be destroyed or sacrificed. And that card is Avarice Amulet. The equipped creature gets +2/+0 and has Vigilance, and it also has, at the beginning of our upkeep, we draw a card. So it's kind of like a Howling Mine just for us, and it gives our creature +2/+0. It has an equip cost of 2, so it's not the most efficient card. It is 4 mana to get out there, but the fact that this card was intended to not work that well, the fact that commanders don't technically die as long as you have them sent to the command zone instead, I think that is a pretty cool interaction, and getting card draw in white is always good. And also, just going over a big difference here, is Eldrazi Monument over Akroma's Memorial. It's a fantastic card, don't get me wrong, but Eldrazi Monument is a little bit more efficient, and it kind of gives you what you want for your tokens anyway, and that is flying and Indestructible. Indestructible is a little bit better, in my opinion, than Protection from Red and Black. It's not terrible, but Indestructible just means that board wipes, easy removal that would normally deal with a huge board state isn't going to be that effective, and it also gives them +1/+1, so double strike's going to add up. It does have the upkeep cost of forcing you to sacrifice a creature, but Kemba makes it to where we can get cat tokens anyway, so we should always be able to pay that sacrifice cost during our upkeep, because then we can just stack the triggers to where we get the cat tokens first. I think that's definitely noteworthy. And I didn't see this on the original version, but we are going to be playing all 3 pieces of Kaldra. So we have the helm, we have the sword, and then we have the shield of Kaldra. Not necessarily because these are the most amazing equipments, but because it does give you that little bit of flavor. I mean, if you're going to play one of these, you might as well play the other 2, because if you are able to get them all out there, you do have a backup plan. You could just make Kaldra, and then you have a pretty decent creature out there. But the helm specifically is going to give you good keywords. The sword's going to give you +5/+5, more power and toughness, and a way to remove creatures when they're dealt damage. And this shield is just going to give some good Indestructible for itself and Kemba. So you have a lot of options here. I think they're all 3 worth it, just because if you're going to play one, you might as well at least consider the other 2. I think that's worth it. And another thing that I think was absent with the first deck were better swords, because while Sword of Fire and Ice is, pretty expensive, it's a pretty cool looking card, there are cheaper options than that actually do better things in Commander. That's going to deal only 2 damage to a target creature and a player, and you get to draw a card. While in this version of the deck, we're going to be playing Sword of Feast and Famine that gives you extra mana, forces our opponent to discard a card. We're going to be playing Light and Shadow that's going to gain us 3 life, and then we get to return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. And then we also play Sword of War and Peace, which is going to punish our opponents if they have a huge hand. It's going to allow us to gain some life based off of our hand too. So all 3 of those I would say are better, just because, protection from blue and red is a little bit weaker. We're going to be getting some better protection for Kemba. Really comes down to just getting protection from the best removal colors, and I think green is going to give us some protection from some of the best creatures in the format as well. So I definitely think you need to upgrade, and these aren't even close to being as expensive as the Sword of Fire and Ice. I think that's the most expensive one anyway, so take that one out, substitute some cheaper options, and you should be good to go. Now, as far as creatures go, they're not terrible, but I would definitely take out the Avacyn Angel of Hope. I think it's good if you have really nothing else to depend on as far as combat goes, but we do. We have ways of giving our creatures indestructible and giving them anthems, giving them other effects that are going to pump them up. So Avacyn is only useful as a flying vigilance indestructible 8/8. I mean, she's amazing, but I don't think she's going to put in even more work in a deck that can just pretty much do everything that she does for us anyway. I just think that it's a little bit too redundant to just keep giving our creatures indestructible. It's not bad, but at some point we need to focus on cat tribal and equipments at the same time. And I did play a little bit more than just 5 creatures, so quickly just going over them. Grand Abolisher is just amazing, gonna make it to where opponents' control decks don't really do anything to us on our turn. Leonin Shikari, equip costs at instant speed, very underrated, but timing is always on your side with a card like this. And if your opponents want to instant speed remove something, well, never hurts to have a Lightning Greaves to save the day. And in an equipment-based deck, especially mono white one, kind of a head scratcher that I didn't see a pure steel paladin. Whenever an equipment enters the battlefield under our control, we get to draw a card, and the Metalcraft is just amazing because it makes our equipment have equip cost of 0. You do have to have 3 or more artifacts, but that shouldn't be a problem in a deck where we play so many. We also play Sram, Senior Edificer, for consistency and card draw again. Going to allow us to draw a card whenever we cast an equipment, so Sram is pretty significant in equipment-based decks for that reason. Stoneforge Mystic, a little bit expensive, a little bit pricey, but definitely worth it for the equipment tutor and the ability to just cheat something into play that's a lot more expensive. That's also fantastic. And Balan Wandering Knight, another one that I did not see in the original deck, but pretty good. If our Kemba gets killed over and over again, we can then depend on Balan, because all we have to do is just pay that activated ability of 2, and then we get to attach all the equipment that we have to it. That's fantastic. And Balan has double strike as long as there are 2 or more equipments attached. That's fantastic. So if you ever want to look for a backup creature for an equipment-based deck, Balan is definitely worth it. We also have the Leonin Abolisher, because hey, giving our artifacts hexproof is fantastic. It's also a cat with 5 toughness, so gonna stay out there and face a lot of the threats. I did like the fact that he was playing Odric Lunarch Marshal, because we are gonna be playing a lot of these cats. We're gonna get a lot of these cat tokens, and our Kemba is going to have a lot of good keywords from the equipment, so definitely worth it to give all those creatures awesome keywords during combat. It is only during combat, so you got to remember that. So if our opponents want to attack us, they also have to remember that our creatures are going to gain indestructible, other good keywords. And then we also have Regal Caracal, which is something that wasn't in the original deck, but is fantastic for cat tribal. If you want to focus more on cat tribal, you could definitely do that. I just think that Regal Caracal is one of the best cards to do that with, because it's going to give all of our other cats +1/+1. This is including Kemba, by the way, and lifelink. And it gives you 2/1/1 white cat creature tokens upon entering the battlefield. So that's just fantastic. Stonehewer Giant's a staple in any equipment-based deck, period. That activated ability, being able to just search our library for an equipment card in response to targeted removal, board wipes, anything like that. We get to then attach it to a creature we control, so you could attach a Darksteel Plate to Stonehewer Giant in response to a board wipe, and then just save it for when we want to bring out Kemba, and then search our library for Lightning Greaves, protect Kemba. A lot of cool ways that you can dodge removal, or at least stop removal with Stonehewer Giant. Fantastic card. Sun Titan, I think, is a staple in just about every single white deck, period, and especially in a deck where we have a lot of CMC 3 or less artifacts. That's never really a bad thing either. I do like the fact that he had an Elish Norn in there, just a good staple in mono white, period, because we're typically going to get a lot of good tokens out there, giving them all +2/+2 on that Anthem, and also taking away 2/2 from our opponent's creatures. I think that's awesome. I didn't see Raksha Golden Cub. Raksha should definitely be in this type of commander deck, where we can easily just equip stuff to him, and then just give all of our other cat creatures +2/+2 and double strike. This is including Kemba yet again. So while this deck isn't going to focus solely on cat tribal, it's definitely going to want to focus on combat. It's going to want to focus on giving all of our creatures, our whole team, which is coincidentally going to be cats, some good buffs, some good keywords. This does both and shouldn't be too hard. He's a little bit more expensive, but he also has Vigilance, so I think he's definitely worth it. As far as our enchantments go, I think I'm playing about the same number, but I'm not playing certain cards like Martyr's Bond and Radiant Destiny. I like Radiant Destiny for the deck, but I felt like I should probably cut it. I think there's better options for consistency purposes. I'm going to replace that with a land tax. In mono white, you can't really beat this, especially if you're going second, third, or fourth. Land tax is just going to help you stay in the game. Even if it's every single turn you're searching for just 1 or 2 planes, it's still pretty good. Guarantees you always have that land drop. I think that's fantastic. Very underrated card, easy to overlook, but it's just going to put in so much work. And I think instead of Martyr's Bond, I decided to place a Garda's Aid because it allows us to cast our equipments as though they had flash, which is also pretty underrated. You have the advantage in timing. That's fantastic. And we also get to basically for free just equip a creature whenever an equipment enters the battlefield. I think that's pretty cool. So all, again, on a 1 mana enchantment, these are 2 pretty good substitutions, going to make the deck a little bit quicker, a little bit more consistent. And we also play awesome enchantments like Anointed Procession, Cathar's Crusade, and True Conviction because we want to benefit off the team, and all 3 of those cards are just fantastic for doing that. And I don't believe he was playing in Nahiri. He was actually playing in Elspeth's Sun's Champion, which I love both Planeswalkers, but I feel like for this deck, Nahiri is going to be a little bit more on point with what we're trying to do. I think Elspeth is fantastic, and I would definitely love to play here, but when it came to cuts, didn't necessarily have the room to put an Elspeth in here. So I think Nahiri offers us a little bit more consistency, allows us to bring an equipment back from our graveyard to the battlefield, or one from our hand onto the battlefield off of our minus, and allows us to get a core creature token out there and basically equip something for free. That's fantastic. That's exactly what you want to do. She's the only planeswalker that I feel like synergizes perfectly with equipments. Once you do get to her ult, she just gives you a pretty cool equipment. It's going to make a pretty awesome creature. Double strike, +5/+5. That equipment also is indestructible and an equip cost of 0, so just fantastic. Now, where this deck is really going to be different is the instants and sorceries. Now, instead of just Swords to Plowshares, I think it's important to also play Dispatch and Path to Exile. Can never have enough exiling removal. Dispatch is pretty much the best one you could play in this type of deck because we're almost always going to have that Metalcraft if we play enough of our equipments. It's not just going to tap a target creature, it's going to exile it. Enlightened Tutor is really what you want in this type of deck, and I was surprised that I didn't see it. Instant speed, we get to search up an awesome equipment and then put it on the top of our deck. That is way too good to not play. We also have White Sun Zenith because this is Cat Tribal. I mean, it's a sub-theme, but it's still a theme. Instant speed, being able to create X/2/2 white cat creature tokens is fantastic. And dependent on whether or not we have some other things, we have a Coat of Arms in the deck, which was there before, but it's even better with a card like this. You're just going to get so much power and toughness. It's fantastic. But really, yet again, when it comes down to removal, we're also going to be playing a Return to Dust. Fantastic card. If you're going to be playing mono white, something like this is an auto include. Yet again, pretty surprising to see it not in the original deck, which if you're having troubles dealing with your opponent's decks, this might be why. Not playing enough efficient removal is going to cause you to lose more games than is necessary. Sorceries, we do have a Steel Shaper's Gift and an Open the Armory, something that wasn't in the original. We also play Austere Command and Mass Calcify. Those are both in this version of the deck also, but we, in addition to that, also play Wrath of God, Open the Armory, and Steel Shaper's Gift, 2 of which are going to be awesome tutors for our equipments. That's exactly what we want anyway. And Wrath of God is just going to give us another good board wipe because might as well play another one. It's good removal. Now, as far as the lands go, I don't think there's anything that's gonna absolutely break this deck if you don't play it, but I did add something like an Inventor's Fair into my version of the deck because it's just gonna allow us to search up whatever equipment we want as long as we trigger that Metalcraft ability. And at the beginning of our upkeep, if we have 3 or more artifacts, we get to gain 1 life. It does tap for 1 colorless mana, but it is multi-purposed. I think it's pretty good. Buried Ruin is also something I don't think I saw in the original version, going to allow us to get a target artifact card from our graveyard to our hand so we can recover late game. I think that's fantastic. And also, we play Emeria the Sky Ruin. Late game, being able to return creature cards from our graveyard to the battlefield is fantastic, and it's honestly a staple in mono white decks. You do need 7 or more planes, so that's the only reason why I would say late game, but it's still fantastic whenever you can get consistent recursion. And then the last land that I think was more of a head scratcher was probably Myriad Landscape. I mean, it's awesome in monocolored decks. You get 2 of the planes that you need. You're only playing that 1 basic land type, so you might as well be able to get 2 of them from your deck deck onto the battlefield tapped. But really, that's going to do it. I mean, that's pretty much the deck. It was already pretty decent. It had a pretty good shell going on there. It was pretty much what you were looking for, was just a lot of equipments, and I think it's easy to get sidetracked with a ton of the equipments that you have in this game, period. But at some point, it just becomes redundant, and you see a lot of the same pump effects on artifact equipments, and at some point, you just need to diversify what you're getting out of your equipment. You need some good keywords like indestructible, double strike, lifelink, vigilance, flying, and then you need some that are just there for protection. You need shroud, maybe the swords can offer protection from specific colors, but you want to limit how many you play also, because it can definitely hurt the overall consistency of the deck. So you're not going to be able to get efficient removal, you're not going to be able to get efficiency out of your other creatures, you're not going to run into as many creatures when you're only playing 5. My version plays 13, so you have more flavor when it comes to support creatures. You have more ways of interacting with artifacts, especially when it comes to cards like Stonehewer Giant. I think that's a staple in equipment-based decks, period. So overall, I hope, Arcane Mastery, that this was able to help you and your friend out. I don't claim to be perfect, because I don't want to take weeks at a time for deck techs or whatever. This is going to be probably a Deck Doctor series now. I want to get these out as soon as I possibly can, but I do take time enough to consider all things, and I think it's definitely good if you can round your deck out, which is what I try to do with this deck. You get some more instants, you get some more sorceries, balance it out a bit more. It's always going to be good for your deck. You don't want your deck to be too linear, but at the same time, something like this, mono white, you can only do so much. We still end up playing about 32 artifacts. I'm not sure how many equipment specifically we play, but it's probably close to 28 if I had to give my best guess. Overall, though, I still think that's enough for the deck. About a third of the deck is going to be artifacts. In an equipment-based deck, it's not always just about getting equipments, it's about getting ways to access those equipments from our deck, which is pretty important because you can get the equipments that you want instead of just an equipment. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this Deck Doctor video. Thanks again, Arcane Mastery, for being a patron. If you guys are curious about that, the link will be in the description below to my Patreon. And also the link to the official deck of mine on Tapped Out will be in the description box below also. So as always, you guys have a wonderful day. Void here signing off. See you all next video.